Susie's Secret by Fansick. Milo stumbles in on Susie and finds out that she's been hiding something from everyone. Will continue if I get some love. Chapter 1. Milo POV. I was so bored. Normally it's no trouble for me to find something to do. My short attention span makes stupid things a lot more interesting than what a normal person would think. But today I was desperate to find something to do. At first I headed to the clubhouse, thinking that my friends would be there. But it was empty. Usually I at least find Mikey in here lighting his farts on fire. How he manages to do that without burning the entire place down, I have no idea. But whatever. I wandered around the valley, going to everyone's house to try and offend someone to hang out with. Peggy was going around town collecting signatures for some cause. I think she does that stuff just because she loves paperwork. I don't care for Helga much, but she lived close to Peggy, so I stopped there next. She claimed that she had to go to something for the Debbies, a tea party or whatever. I just smiled and nodded, not willing to stay there while she had some tantrum claiming that the Debbies really did like her, that they called her fatty, not fatty, that she was ultra cool. It was too much to handle. I headed to Mikey's next. Turns out he needed to go bra shopping so he could have some underwear. All that was left was Susie now. I knocked at her door. When I didn't get an answer, I walked on in, thinking that maybe she was lighting things on fire or making soup again. I went through the kitchen and saw a large pan filled with scorched and blackened papers, but she wasn't in there. Susie? I hollowered. I was beginning to doubt that she was home, and sighed, ready to turn and leave, until I heard a shuffling from upstairs. I brightened and immediately ran up the stairs. I had to look around the rooms in the hall to try and see which one she was in, though. Since her room was the only one with the door closed, I guessed she was in there, and with a stupid smile on my face, I went over and threw the door open. "Hey, Susie." I stopped. My jaw dropped open. Normal POV. Susie froze, her wide-eyed gaze on the mirror. She was silently praying that her eyes were deceiving her, and Milo wasn't standing in her room. But when she turned around, there he was. His mouth opened, his cheeks flushed pink, and the room was quiet for what seemed like ages before he spoke. "I'm sorry. I thought my friend was in here," he mumbled. Susie was confused by that statement. Did he really not recognize her? "You are slow, Milo," the dark girl returned in her accented voice. At this, Milo just blushed darker. "Oh my God, Susie. It is you." "Yes, it is," she sighed. Milo took in her appearance, amazed. "But you aren't hunched over. You don't have a lazy eye, and you're wearing makeup." "I know," she said. She seated herself on the edge of her bed. "I look like that so I can walk around in public." "I don't understand," Milo admitted, taking a seat beside her. "Milo, when you live in the valley, you can't look like this," she stated, gesturing to herself. "You have to blend in. You fake looking less attractive?" Milo was shocked. Out of most of the people he hung around with, and not including any hill kids he ever ran into, Susie was one of the more normal-looking people. He thought her dark personality and humor made her kind of cute. But he never would have thought that she was hot. "Since when do you care about blending in?" "Milo, I may not be able to change my personality or accent, but I can do something about the way I look. Do you really think I'd fit in anywhere if people knew that a valley girl could look like this?" Milo sat there in silence, letting her words sink in. It was really the most Susie had ever said to anyone, and even though he knew well enough that her words made sense, it also didn't make sense. Sure, Susie may be treated different if people actually knew she was hot, seeing as they all lived in a town where looks and money were everything, but it didn't change the fact that she was still a valley girl. Plus, there were other people that went to school that weren't rich and looked fine, though they didn't live in the valley. Not the bad part, anyway. "Susie, we wouldn't treat you different," Milo promised. "We've been friends with you for years, and we've accepted everything else about you." "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just a little reassurance. Milo, I know your art is in the right place, but I don't think they would be as accepting. They had no problem with Debbie. Come on. Tonight when everyone goes to the clubhouse, just show up like this." I don't know. If they don't like it, you can change yourself back. It was such a horrible thing to say. Milo actually had to keep the bile from creeping up his throat when he said it, but he was willing to say anything to make Susie feel better. Susie sat in thought for several moments before she sighed in defeat. I suppose. Milo beamed, suddenly excited for their club meeting. So, Chapter 2, Milo POV. I was hopping up and down for about half an hour, waiting for everyone to show up for Out Club meeting. I couldn't wait for everyone to see Susie. I knew she was nervous, but damn, it was exciting. I was in the clubhouse, having run out there as soon as I got home. Finally, Peggy came in, a clipboard and Gaval. "Hello, Milo," she spittled. "Hey, Peggy." I was still jumping and hopping from foot to foot. She looked confused as she watched me for a moment. "Did something happen?" "Yes." "Want to tell me what it is?" "Yes, but I can't." Instead of answering, she rolled her eyes and began to set up her little podium, and Mikey and Helga showed up, with Helga teasing him again. "Seriously, look at that damn thing. Like an old man's ball sack." She laughed loudly. "Would you quit with the ass jokes?" Mikey hollowered, tossing his pillow on the floor and plopping down cross-legged, pouting with his arms crossed over his chest. "You guys shut up!" I shouted. I stopped my jumping and started pacing in a small circle in the middle of the room. "What crawled up your butt?" Helga asked as she plopped to the floor with a loud thud, seeming bored. "He's just being weird is all," Peggy insisted, shrugging it off. "You guys, please, be nice to Susie when she comes tonight, Kay?" I requested, catching everyone off guard. "Something happened to Susie?" Peggy panicked. "Did her dad get beat up again?" Mikey asked, concerned. "Don't be stupid," Helga grumbled, eating acorns that had fallen on the floor. "Her psycho little brother probably just got sent to juvie or some shit." "It's nothing like that," I said. "She just needs to tell you guys something. I just learned about it earlier today, and she wanted to tell you all herself when she got here." Before they could question further, Susie came in wearing a large black hoodie worn nearly to death, the hood covering her face. "Susie!" I exclaimed excitedly. "You're finally here!" She didn't respond, but kept her head down, stepping further into the clubhouse. "So what's this big news?" Helga blurted carelessly. "Whatever you have to say, we support and love you," Peggy assured, patting Susie on the shoulder. Susie just nodded wordlessly before taking a deep breath. "Okay, here goes." She stood straight and unzipped her hoodie, before tossing the hood back and letting the piece of clothing fall to the floor. I grinned and looked around to see everyone's reaction. Peggy's expression was blank. Helga stopped eating, and Mikey had drool beginning to pool on the corners of his mouth. Susie blushed, looking at the floor. "Vel, vat do you all think?" she asked timidly. It was quiet a moment more before Mikey spoke up. "Susie, you look so pretty." She blushed darker. "Yeah," Helga beamed. "Who'd have thought one of you would be as pretty as me?" Insert sweat drop. "Susie, you look so stunning," Peggy gushed. "Tell me your secret." I smiled as she was surrounded by our friends, noticing that she was relaxing. When will people begin to realize I know what I'm talking about? Chapter 3, Susie POV. "Susie, how could you keep us from something like this?" Peggy asked, forgetting completely about her meeting duties. "Yeah, you have any idea how much easier we could have had it?" Helga butted in. She had gotten over her shock and began eating again. Acorns this time. I frowned. "Eat's complicated," I muttered, turning my gaze to the floor. When they first saw me like this, they seemed so happy, but now... "Look, guys, lay off." Milo butted in. She was scared of being outcast even more. Show a little compassion. I was embarrassed to have him speak for me, but as usual, my voice didn't work. I couldn't speak. The familiar feeling of my throat going dry and my eyes watering came up. I blinked fiercely, determined to keep my head down. Usually I could shrug off these feelings, but now I was wearing makeup, and there'd be no way to deny it if my tears slipped out. Compassion, Helga scoffed. We could have spent this whole time with the Debbies being cool, and instead she decided to play the deformed emo. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Susie, are you okay? Came Mikey's hoarse voice. Even though my eyes were locked on the floor, I felt all of their gazes on me. My breath hitched and my sight blurred. Before I could stop it, the silence of the room exposed the quiet thud of my tears hitting the floor. Not thinking of how I looked, I clasped both hands over my mouth, trying in vain to keep my sobs from rising from my throat. My breath came out sharply from my nose, and my tears flowed freely now, soaking my cheeks and making my hands wet. Are you going to be sick? Peggy panicked. Do you need a bucket? I couldn't reply. My shoulders shook, and I bolted from the clubhouse, not bothering to come up with an excuse to leave. Milo POV. It was silent as we watched Susie leave. I glanced over at the wet spots on the floor, feeling a pain in my chest. I'd never seen Susie cry before. Whoa, Helga said, breaking the silence. I glared at her. Now look what you did. I told you to be nice to her. How the hell was I supposed to know she'd bawl like a little bitch? Helga demanded. Not like she's ever done it before. I didn't reply. I knew she had a point, dumb as it was. Instead, I just made my way outside, seeing her sitting at the worn picnic table by the back door. Just as I was about to go over, though, Mom came outside. Pickles POV. I came down to the kitchen to refill my scotch glass after putting Betsy to bed. I lit up a new cigarette and was about to head upstairs when I saw one of Milo's little friends outside. I went back over to the window and saw her with her head down, her shoulders shaking. I frowned at the sight. I barely spoke to Milo's friends, but I remembered her from when I was a little Amazon's troop leader. She was always sad then, but never like this. I set my glass down and put away my cigarette and headed outside. As I made my way to the table, I could clearly hear her muffled crying. Hey, you okay? Susie POV. I lifted my head slightly and blushed in embarrassment at seeing Mrs. Oblong there. I nodded weakly, putting my head back down and hoped she'd leave. Luck was never on my side. She just sat down beside me. Come on, honey. What's wrong? She asked softly. It reminded me a little of how my mother spoke to my older sister. The good daughter. No sing. I forced out. It's not nothing, or you wouldn't be crying. I didn't say anything. Too tired to argue. Aren't you one of Milo's friends? Shouldn't you be playing with them? Jay ate me, I said, more tears coming and flowing down, stinging my eyes. Why do they hate you? Because, I gasped out. I ID myself, and now Jay ate me, saying that if I had any guts, she would have been cool. What? I made myself look ugly to fit in. Pickles POV. That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I shrugged it off, though, rubbing circles on her back. Honey, being cool isn't that great. I'm sure your friends don't hate you. Maybe they just need to get used to the real you. Or maybe they're jealous. Who knows? I felt her relax a little, but she still refused to look up. I suppose. That's the spirit. My job being done, I went back inside to enjoy my scotch and smokes. Susie POV. Jealous, huh? I lifted my head. My vision cleared a little. Standing up, I took several deep breaths and tried to wipe my eyes with my sleeves as best I could. I was shivering a little, but I didn't dare go back into the clubhouse for my sweater. Sighing and feeling more tired than I ever had before, I began to make my way home. I'd need all the rest I could get before tomorrow. At school. Chapter 4. Normal POV. Milo fidgeted, not paying much attention to the chilly air. He was currently standing at the bus stop with his friends, excluding Susie. The dark girl had left last night after her little episode without so much as a goodbye. It made Milo nervous, wondering what was going through her head. He wouldn't be surprised if she showed up wearing her old disguise after the way she broke down. Milo sighed, catching his friend's attention. Come on, Milo. She's not going to come to school today, Helga said, rolling her eyes. Not after that dramatic scene. I hope she's okay, Peggy mumbled. If she doesn't come today, We should go to her house and cheer her up. I'm not going over there, Helga exclaimed. Her family's nuts. Damn it, Helga. Can't you be nice to Susie for once? Milo demanded. I'm just stating facts, the obese redhead huffed. Milo was about to say something else, but Mikey grabbed his shoulder, shaking it frantically, and pointing to something behind the psychotic boy. When Milo turned, he saw Susie standing there in her Yusuzel bulk dress, and without her get-up, silence took over, all eyes on Susie, who seemed to be refusing to annul at her friends, instead looking straight ahead, her head held high and eyes fixed. So Susie, decided to crawl out of your cobwebbed bed? Helga asked. Susie gave no response and remained motionless. It was making Milo nervous. Susie, are you okay? Susie glanced over at Milo, though still motionless. We'll see, was the quiet response before the bus pulled up. Peggy and Helga climbed on, Mikey stumbling a little as he followed. Milo sighed in defeat and also got on, leaving Susie as the last passenger. Something Milo really wished he hadn't done, because in doing this, he had drawn a lot of attention to the raven-haired girl and her new look. And this was the last stop before school, meaning a lot of people were able to gawk ... including the hill kids. And at Susie POV, I had a lot of time to think about what Mrs. Oblong said, about the possibility that Helga was jealous, and I figured that maybe she was right. It made a lot of sense anyway. I mean, I'd known Helga for a long time, and she was always obsessing over the Debbies. She did everything she could to convince herself that she could blend in with them, that she was good enough, and here I was doing the exact opposite. I was different, yes, but I had a better chance of fitting in with the hill kids than she did, and I refused to take it. Of course she was mad at me. I couldn't just mope around. I was miserable enough without adding on to the list. It would be nice if just for once, I didn't blend into the background. If for one instance, I could be the one people would talk about or even talk to. No. So I sucked it up and decided that I needed to at least try to change. And the first step was to accept who I was and become a little more open. Though I didn't expect it to attract so much attention so quickly. Hey, a new girl, one of the Debbies pointed out. Totally cool. I heard Emo is in, but wow. Another gushed. I wonder who does her makeup. The group of blondes then went on about how they had to find... Why is she getting on here? Jared Clymer asked his sidekick Blaine. She isn't a valley dork, is she? I felt the heat rise up and color my cheeks, but I kept my head high and joined my friends sitting toward the back of the bus. Oh, I could already tell it'd be a long day. Chapter 5. Milo POV. We all watched from out seat as Susie sat in the very front, reading one of those old and creepy leather-bound novels she loved so much. Even without looking over my shoulder, I knew that from the pure silence on the usually loud bus, the other kids were watching her too. A lot of people trying to figure out who she was. It was actually pretty funny that no one thought that it was Susie, but it was understandable. I didn't realize it was her when I first saw her like this either. She's so pretty, Tilda? A Debbie gushed. We so have to talk to her. Another added. I smiled at that, even though I heard Helga groaning in frustration. Someone was jealous, Tilda. In what seemed like no time, the bus stopped in front of the school. Everyone was still frozen, though, as Susie stood before everyone else and calmly stepped off of the bus, her hips actually swaying a bit as she opted to walk rather than float like she usually did. Of course, after she stepped off, the rest of us practically ran trying to be as close to her as possible. I had to duck under a ton of people to be next to her. Susie, I'm so happy that you didn't dress back into your old outfit. She normally bothered to do anything, so this was a really big deal. She smiled a little, about to say something when she was interrupted. Susie, creepy Susie from the valley. It was Jared Clymer, followed as always by that pain in the ass Blaine. Susie's cheeks turned a light pink, something that never happened before, and made her look even prettier. You sound surprised, she stated, keeping her eyes ahead. Yeah, well, hey, maybe you'd like to hang out, get out of the valley for a while? Did Jared Clymer just ask her out? Sorry, she apologized half-heartedly. I have plans, right, Milo? It took a moment before it finally clicked. Yeah, we found some weird thing in an alley, and we have to have a meeting to discuss what it was when it was alive. Jared looked grossed out, and Blaine about puked before Jared looked back at Susie. Well, offer's open, so whatever. He rushed off into the school after that, us walking through the big doors seconds later. Susie POV. It's working. I could hardly believe it. Mrs. Oblong had been right. Helga had been jealous. For once I was happy to be in my own skin. I wanted to smile and talk to people. I finally loved myself because I wasn't ashamed of who I was. I was no longer hiding anything. Oh, and it was wonderful. Chapter 6. Susie POV. I didn't eat lunch. A lot of Valley children didn't, seeing as we never did have much of a cafeteria, and the Hill children had special meals brought to them in their TV room. Course, we didn't have much of a library either, but that didn't keep me from going every lunch period. Actually, it was much like the public library on Main Street. Except to be in the school library, you don't have to go through that weird part, where there were the mutated bear with no legs waits in the alley for people to just walk by. I only mean that it's the same in saying that all it contains is a gathering of books, newspapers, and magazines that people forgot or didn't want, as well as cigarette packets so people can read the ingredients. So there's a lot of outdated educational material, mainly history books, that refer to the civil rights movement as trouble ahead, old playboys, and harlequin romances. When I first started to notice boys, I couldn't stomach the romances. The sex portions I got, but the whole soulmate, or forever loyal to my one true love thing, ... it, confused me to the point where I'd get a headache or rush to the bathroom to throw up. I tried asking my great-great-great-grandmother Ruby about boys, but it didn't do any good because she'd been dead a long time. And when I tried asking my older sister, she screamed at me that she was on the phone and kicked me out of the house. I tried asking my mom, but she quickly went on to say that she had way too much housework to do to talk about such adult things with her little girl. And I just didn't bother asking my dad or little brother because Dad disappeared and my little brother was too, well, little. But now that I was a bit older, I was able to stomach the entire love topic just a little better. I even came to kind of crave it. I convinced myself that it was a stupid idea, though. After all, I had to hide myself to blend in better, and who would be interested in dating a girl with a lazy eye and a hump on her back? I'm pretty convinced that Valley kid or not, no guy is desperate enough for that. I mean, Mikey likes me, obviously, but he grosses me out from time to time, and has no self-confidence. I know it's stupid, but I had a stupid crush on Jared Clymer for a long time. I know he's a self-centered jerk who tried to light us on fire years ago, but he's so confident and so good-looking and athletic. I've snuck into sporting events just to watch him. So I was over the moon when he spoke to me before, but it was also the reason I was in the library now. I needed to look through all this stuff to what girls do to keep a guy's attention. I already knew to try and play hard to get, but that was all I had. If he wanted to talk to me again, I couldn't just do the same thing over and over again. He'd think I just wasn't interested. Ooh, Milo POV. I was happy when school was over. Plus, it was the day that Mom got to go shopping, so we were all able to gorge at least for today, before everyone came over for the club meeting, which meant I'd get to see Susie again. I don't know why, but I really loved seeing Susie the way she was now. She actually looked happy and approachable, but at the same time, it kind of ticked me off. For some reason, whenever someone would talk to her, like that stupid Jared, I got I don't know, I just didn't like it. So it made me happy to know that at least she was still coming to club meetings. I mean, she blew off the Hill kids, so that must mean that things wouldn't change, right? I mean, she still did the same basic things she always did, even if she was happier. She still went to the library at lunch. She still loved slimy things. She still liked to talk about death. Same old Susie. And that's why I liked her. No matter what, she stood out. Milo, "One of your little friends is at the door," Mom commented, coming back into the kitchen to refill her margarita glass. I didn't bother asking which one. She never remembered their names. Pulling myself from the table, I rushed to get the door, expecting Peggy, since she always wanted to say hi before going to get herself situated in the clubhouse, and she had a habit of showing up ridiculously early, saying that she needed to tidy up the room, but instead seeing Mikey. "Oh, hey, Mikey, you're early." "Yeah, I was hoping I could talk to you about something before everyone else showed up," he mumbled, his finger in his ear and his eyes on the ground. "Yeah, sure." I let him in and brought him up to my room, thankful that my family was all together in the kitchen so no one would eavesdrop. "What's up?" Mikey sat up on the bed, twiddling his thumbs nervously like he usually did, but something seemed a little off. "It's just Susie." Great. I knew he liked Susie, but this was not a conversation I wanted to have right now. "Mikey, I know you like Susie, but it isn't about that." He cut off. "I mean, yeah, I do. But this isn't about me. It's about her. What is... I saw Susie in the library at lunchtime, and she's always there at lunchtime. Not reading romance novels and Playboy. She always reads about death and anatomy. But not this stuff." He did have a point. So she's reading some new stuff? Who cares? She's still the same old Susie. What if she's not, though? What if she tries that stuff? I know Jared basically asked her out already. She might turn into a Hill groupie. What? No way! Not Susie! I came up beside Mikey and put a hand on his shoulder. "I know Susie, and she's not like that. Things won't change. You promise?" "No." "Yes, I promise." I leapt down from the bed. "Come on, let's get to the clubhouse before Peggy gets here." Mikey nodded and followed me out, but I knew that neither of us was convinced that things would stay the same. Chapter 7. Jared POV. I hate my sister. And her friends. I knew I had to hang out with them because they were hill people like me. Dad always said that it was only right to be with your own people. The only person that I could stand was Blaine, and that was because he was honest with me about stuff. But he was still a little ass-kiss sometimes. "So, Jared, how was school?" I looked up at my dad, realizing that I had just spent about 15 minutes poking at my food. Before I could even answer, Debbie perked up with that stupid girly voice of hers. "It was awesome, Tilda," she gushed. There was this new girl who lived with the Valley kids, but she looked so not Valley-like, that new emo dark look thing that totally works and is totally in right now. "And oh my God, Mom, you would not believe it. She's French. So cool. A new girl, huh?" Dad rubbed his chin a little in thought. "Funny. I don't remember employing anyone new at the factory or seeing moving vans come in through town." "She's not new, Dad," I explained. "She just looked new because she changed so much." "Plastic surgery?" Mom said. "How could a Valley family afford it?" "It wasn't surgery. She made herself look ugly to fit in and then quit." I had overheard Milo Oblong and his stupid sag-ass friend in the hallway that day talking about it. "Look ugly on purpose?" Dad scoffed. "Why, that's ridiculous. But at least she knows how to fit in." I was kinda relieved that he was gonna leave it alone. But then, of course, my stupid sister opened her stupid mouth. Giggling a little in that disgusting and irritating way she does, she said it. "Oh, but Dad, that's not the best part, Tilda. Jared asked her out." "Shut up, Debbie," I shouted across the table, my face heating up. "A Valley girl. But why, Jared?" my mom asked, concerned. "There are plenty of girls up here on the hills." "Yeah, and they all look like Debbie," I said. "Doesn't matter. She turned me down anyway," I grumbled, more to myself than anything. "Of course Dad heard. Turned you down? I insist to know who this girl is." "No, then I'll never have a chance with her." "Dad, it's not a big deal. It's creepy Susie." "Damn it, Debbie, shut up." "Susie, huh? Then that settles it. I'll talk to her tomorrow." "Dad, please." Don't worry, son. I'll make you sound good," he said, with what was supposed to be a reassuring smile. All it did was piss me off, and I left dinner without a word. stomping out of the room and pulling out my phone to call Blaine. I needed to vent to someone. Ooh, Susie POV. I loved the weekends. My older sister was out, my brother was with his friends, and my mother and father spent their time together. As for me, it varies. Today I was in the back room cleaning it out. I used to have this room for my special collections. I had this phase when I filled the shelves along the far wall with dead chickens. I took awe in the way they all looked so peaceful, while their forms were mangled alongside each other so uncomfortably. But yesterday, when I came home, I decided that I no longer wanted to do it anymore. The situation was no longer one of fascination ... IT was just a little gruesome and distasteful. I didn't like the idea of rotting chickens piled so high being so close to me. Really, it was a wonder that my mother and sister weren't having a fit. Sighing and dragging the last of the mess outside to be burned, the sound of still air and lapping flames was interrupted by the sound of a car, not something I heard often, as my parents preferred bikes, and I lived in a rather quiet part of the town, far from the main roads. Curious. I headed to the front yard, peeking around the corner of my home, and shocked to see a short limo parked on the street before me, with none stepping out of it but the town's infamous George Clymer. What the hell is he doing here? Are we being evicted? Father didn't say anything. I was so lost in my thoughts I jumped when we addressed me. Excuse me, I'm looking for a Susie. This is the right address, isn't it? He was much taller than me. I hadn't paid much attention to that fact until now, as he stood just a few steps away from me. I barely came up to the base of his chest. Yes, that is me. I almost couldn't find my voice. Unexpectedly, he smiled at me. One of those smiles Milo described when he saw his father say something pleasing to the tyrant. Wonderful, he replied. Do you mind if I come in to have a word with you? When I shook my head no, he nodded, giving yet another smile. He turned back to his driver then, who was standing dutifully by the limo. You can go ahead and cut the engine. I'll be staying a while. Nervous, I let him inside, grateful I had cleaned up the back room. The air still smelled like lemon. My mother loved spending money on cleaning products, being a bit of a germaphobe. Looks nice in here, Mr. Clymer commented. Much nicer than the Oblong house. I didn't agree, but I knew that this was his attempt to be nice, so I let it go. Would you like something to drink? I have tea, water, coffee. Coffee, please. Black. I quickly got it from the kitchen as he seated himself in the living room in a large chair. I handed it to him quietly before sitting down on the couch, purposely sitting just close enough to listen to what he had to say, but while remaining out of reach in case he planned to strike me. I understand this wasn't likely to happen, but he's a large older man with enough money to bail himself out of any trouble, and you can never be too careful. So, Susie, I see that you've certainly changed a bit. My daughter mentioned that at dinner last night, but seeing it is so much different than hearing about it. Tell me, why the sudden change? I shrugged, wondering why in the hell he was asking me this. I didn't know that to tell you. A friend of mine saw me like this and insisted that I stay like this. So I did. And I wound up liking it. I see. Well, it seems like the new you has made quite the impression on my daughter and her friends. And my son. I noted the drop in his tone, the implied air. When I glanced over, he was watching me closely for any reaction. I wasn't sure what to say, what to do, so I continued looking at him, not breaking eye contact and keeping the flush from appearing on my face, something I was good at. I always kept my emotions hidden as much as possible around my friends. He seemed disappointed by this, setting his cup down, a distressed look beginning to appear on his face. He sat back and gazed at me again. I care a lot for my son, and I know that he can be a handful. Not as much as Debbie or her friends, but enough to give him a rather poor reputation. I sipped from my cup, reluctant to say anything to the comment. What could I say? Confirm that his son was a jerk at times? Or deny it because I liked him, despite the fact he was a jerk? Mr. Clymer took this as a sign to continue talking. When Debbie told me about your new look last night, it wasn't the only thing she mentioned. I understand that. My son asked you out. I nearly choked on my drink, my eyes going wide but stayed quiet. I also understand that you turned him down. I couldn't prevent it now. My face was aflame. I was embarrassed, ashamed, almost hurt. Where was he going with this? My voice stopped on me for a moment, overwhelmed with emotion and growing fear. I know, Jat. You have a lot of influence here. Are you going to evict us because I did it? Get my father fired? Get me arrested for some drug charge, maybe? I didn't know what I was saying, but I couldn't stop myself. I was so upset that he'd come here and bring this up. Why the hell did he do it? To laugh at me for thinking I was good enough? To yell at me for turning down Jared? It was quiet for a moment as I awaited his answer. I was facing away, trying to still remain distant, but I was sure that he saw me blinking furiously to rid myself of the tears. I didn't expect him to let out a bitter laugh. Oh, I see. So this is why he didn't want me here. He muttered it, almost quietly. I don't think he intended for me to hear it. Oh, who didn't? His associates? The mayor? One of his country club buddies? I couldn't stifle my curiosity. My son. I said I'd come over to talk to you, and he practically begged me not to. I guess he figured you'd have this reaction. I didn't even consider it. My eyes widened a bit. Jared wanted to protect me from feeling like this? Why? Wasn't I just the new pretty girl he hadn't touched yet? Mr. Clymer stood then, smiling, despite the fact that he was obviously unhappy with how this went. I apologize for bothering you. It seems that I should have listened to my son. Thank you for the coffee, and don't worry, I hadn't planned on threatening you. I just wanted you to give him a chance. Without another word, he let himself out. I was only vaguely aware of hearing the limo pull away outside. Jared wanted to protect me. I don't understand. Chapter 8. Jared POV. What do you care? It's not like your dad would want you dating a valley girl anyway. Blaine was right, but I didn't like it. I huffed and laid back on the huge beanbag chair he had in his room, looking at the ceiling. Yeah. I didn't have it in me to argue after Debbie cornered me when I was trying to leave. She started a screaming match, and I felt embarrassed about it. I hated how crazy she and her friends made me. She had said stuff about how I should thank her because it wouldn't do me any good to be around Valley trash. And I snapped, telling her I didn't give a shit about her opinion. I ran a hand over my face. I get that the Valley is disgusting. Just because I like Susie doesn't mean I was gonna give up my life and move down there. I still liked being part of a rich and successful lifestyle. I still liked having clean clothes and clean water. I couldn't do a factory job unless I ran one like my dad did. Besides, you know how Valley trash is, Blaine went on, throwing darts on the opposite side of the room. They hate us, 'cause we have everything so much better. She'd just blow you off, calling you a spoiled brat just because your dad's loaded and your mom doesn't work. And your cunt sister isn't gonna help any. I snorted a laugh at that last comment. A couple years back, Blaine had a huge thing for my sister and asked her out. She was a nightmare, of course. He had figured she'd be different from the other Debbies because of the incident she had where she was ugly as hell for a while. But since she'd been back on the hills, she'd become even more determined to make a boundary between the high class and rock bottom. Then it clicked. That's right. I spoke up, struck with sudden motivation I'd never felt before. That's right. I bolted up, grinning. Blaine looked at me like I was nuts, and I rambled on. She thinks I'm a spoiled brat. Of course she does. I haven't done a single damn thing on my own. Blaine frowned at me. Well, yeah. Why would you? No, that's not gonna work. I have to do something. I have to get to work and make something of my life. That will show her I'm not my dad. I grabbed my jacket and rushed to hug Blaine before bolting out of his house. As I peeled out of the driveway, I grinned and started making plans. I had an address book full of my connections made through my dad. But instead of using it to get freebies or something, I could use it for good. I could do something to make things better. Maybe then Susie will know how serious I am about her. Ooh, Susie POV. As I sat in Milo's treehouse the next day, I couldn't pay attention to anything Peggy said. I just drifted off onto thoughts of what happened the day before. I frowned. I didn't say anything about what happened with Mr. Clymer, because I didn't know how to explain what he had said to me. What did he mean bringing up Jared like that? It wasn't like his son was serious about dating me. I was just something exotic and new. I sighed quietly, the sound drowned out by Milo and Mikey laughing at something Helga said. I could still dream about what it would be like. It wasn't that Jared was rich. I liked that he was confident and upfront. Sure, he was a bit of a brute, but I appreciated that he was no nonsense. Whether he was born poor or rich, I feel like Jared would have been just as confident. I always drifted to thoughts of what it would be like to see a softer side of the blonde. I smiled as I was swept away with the fantasy of being in those arms, the scent of his cologne surrounding me. But that wouldn't happen. Wake up, Susie. I was broken from my thoughts when Peggy announced the end of the club meeting. I said goodbye to everyone and moved to leave the treehouse. As I waked to the front yard, I waved at Mr. Oblong, seeing him hosing the front yard with the hose in his mouth, a cheerful smile on his face like always. I always did love his sunny demeanor. It was such a contrast with my own pessimism. It was refreshing. I was about to walk home when I saw Mrs. Oblong step into the front yard, lighting a cigarette. She leaned down and pressed a kiss against Mr. Oblong's forehead, making his smile widen. I felt a smile appear on my own face at the display. While I didn't have much faith in anything happening between myself and Jared that could be called a relationship, I was happy that there was a chance of couples finding love across the classes. I could see Milo or Peggy finding love with a Hill family. Milo had a way about him that made so many people like him, and Peggy's knowledge of politics would surely land her a husband that could look past her deformity. I strode home, my eyes running over the houses and people. I sighed. So many things could be better if we had a way to change them. If only the soil and water weren't so poisoned, it wouldn't have led to so many health problems. I couldn't help but hold a little resentment that Valley people were only allowed to be promoted to certain levels, since Hill people didn't want to associate with us more than they had to. I wonder where I could live, where I had more of a chance. Would a high school diploma from this town even amount to anything anywhere else? Maybe I should leave before I got any older. But where would I go? What would I do? I had passions, but no one was interested in investing anything in someone like me. The only good thing that would come of my background would be a tragic backstory that may get me a few grants or scholarships. But I had no interest in more schooling. The quiet air was broken with the curious chatter of townspeople and the rumbling of machinery. Curious, I made my way over to where the crowd was gathered, trying to figure out where the ruckus came from. Forcing my way, though, I felt my jaw nearly drop. Was that Jared Clymer covered in mud and barking orders? What was he doing?